So in one of the Sunday sessions recently, somebody asked me just to give an outline of the story. And for those who are here for the first time, since this is an introductory session, I would do this now. It's the story of Savitri and her husband Satyavan is a very, very ancient tale which is well known all over India. And it is the story of a prince and a princess who meet and fall in love and are going to get married. But then they are warned, or Savitri and her parents are warned, that this prince, Satyavan, is bound to die in 12 months from that very day. So Savitri's parents try to persuade her to go and choose somebody else, but she says that is not possible. She's made the choice from her heart. It's not possible for her to choose again, and she will accept whatever happens. So the marriage happens, and she goes to live with her husband in the forest. Nothing is said to his parents, and she lives with him for these months, these passing months. And in the traditional story, it is told that 3 days before the day when she knows that Satyavan will die, she undertakes a great vow, a very difficult vow of tapasya. She says that she will stand on one spot without moving, without taking food or drinking water for 3 days and 3 nights. The parents try to persuade her that she won't be able to do it, but she says, no, I feel very sure that I will be able to do this. In the traditional story, this is how it goes. And because of this tapasya that she's done, when the god of death comes to take away the soul of Satyavan, she is able to follow him. And they have a conversation. And he's so impressed by her correctness of speech and behavior and understanding of things that he gives her a series of boons, like a fairy granting you 3 wishes. So, first of all, she wishes that her father-in-law, who is living in the forest, this I forgot to tell you, of course, but they are living in the forest because they're exiled from their kingdom because he has fallen blind. She asks that he shall get his sight back and his kingdom back. And in the traditional story then she asks for 100 sons for her own father. This is something that kings needed, to have many strong sons in those days. And finally, he tells her to ask something for herself. And then she says that I wish that I may live happily with my husband and have many children with him. And he says, yes. So then she says, but for that you will have to give me my husband back. So that is granted. This is the basic skeleton of the story. And this story is remembered and celebrated in the different parts of India. There's a day, a special day, the day when Satyavan must die. and on that day married women will fast throughout the day and pray for the welfare of their husband. So in this simple legend, Sri Aurobindo has seen a very deep symbolism. He says that he saw in it one of the many symbolic myths of the Vedic cycle. When Sri Aurobindo studied the Vedas, he came to the conclusion that the language and the images that are used in those texts have a double meaning. They have a surface meaning, which is easy for ordinary people to understand and remember, and with it goes a series of rituals for gaining your earthly wishes. But for people who have a deeper understanding, the same words, the same images have a deep psychological, symbolic significance. And that was what he was interested in. And it's that deeper symbolic meaning that he has brought out in this book. He took that short story, which is recounted in the Mahabharata in about 700 lines. He has taken it and made it into the vehicle of his own vision, his own world view. The mother has called this book the supreme revelation of Sri Aurobindo's vision. And that's really why we study it here. Not because of the story in the Mahabharata, but because this book contains Sri Aurobindo's vision. And since Auroville has been created as a place where Sri Aurobindo's teachings and worldview could be tried to be put into practice, we think that it's important to understand as far as we can what is written in this book. So that's why we're starting today on another cycle of reading. So it helps us perhaps to read the author's note. This is at the beginning of the book. It's here that Sri Aurobindo gives us a clue to, or a key to the basic symbolism of this ancient story. Suresh, would you read the first sentence?
The tale of Satyavan and Savitri is recited in the Mahabharata as a story of
conjugal
love conquering death.
Yes, let's look at this sentence first. So this ancient tale of Satyavan and Savitri is recited in the Mahabharata, in the ancient Indian epic, as a story of conjugal love, the love between husband and wife. And the story tells how that a true love between husband and wife can conquer death. And that is why this story is celebrated by Indian wives. Jerry.
But this legend is, as shown by many features of the Human tale, one of the many symbolic myths of the Vedic cycle.
Yes. So there are other stories which are related. Perhaps the most well-known one is the story of the Angirasas and the cows that are hidden in the cave. It's also a symbolic myth But Aurobindo says there are many of them. And he says that he can see that this legend comes from one of those stories by many features of the human tale, the tale that's recounted in the Mahabharata. There are many features, and as we read through the book, we shall try to identify those features. But one of them is the names of the characters. So that comes next, Patricia.
Satyavan is the soul, carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance.
So this is about the name of Satyavan, the prince. Satyavan, it means one who is carrying the truth within him. Satya is truth. So Satyavan is the soul. Each of us has a soul, and each of those souls is carrying the divine truth of being in it, no? But each of our souls has descended here into the material world, into the grip of death and ignorance. Samadashan.
Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save.
Yes. So this refers also to Savitri's name. The name of Savitri has two distinct connotations. Perhaps they are related in some way. One of them is as the wife or Shakti of the creator god, Brahma. The Shakti, the wife of a god, is his Shakti, his dynamic executive force. So this means that she has control over the creative word, the word that brings things into existence. In the story, Savitri is given this name because her father does a great penance and tapasya to gain the grace of this goddess Savitri. Because this daughter comes to him, she's given the name of the goddess. So she's the divine word. But she's also the daughter of the sun. And in India, it's very beautiful. There are so many different names for the sun. And each of them has a beautiful significance. There's Pushan, the one who helps things to grow. And there's Ravi, the shining one. Savitri, the sun god, is the sun before it rises above the horizon in the morning. So it means Savitri represents the new light coming with a new dawn. Joel.
Aswapati, the Lord of the horse, her human father, is the Lord of Tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavour that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal planes.
So Aswapati is the human father of Savitri, and his name means horse lord. Aswa, horse, lord, Pati. And in the Vedas, the horses represent our energies, energies of all kinds actually, even universal energies. But each of us has our horses. And mostly we are not in control of our horses. Our vital energies run away with us. But Aswapati has controlled, he's become the master of his horses. And this means that he's in control of this concentrated energy of spiritual endeavour, which helps us ordinary human beings to rise from our ordinary human state, from this state of being subject to death, our mortality, and helps us to rise from the mortal planes to the immortal planes, the state of immortality. And that's what he's described doing in this poem. Then there's another father, Martin.
Dyumatsena, Lord of the Shining Horse, father of Satyavan, is the divine mind here fallen blind, losing his celestial kingdom of vision, and through that loss his kingdom of glory.
Yes, Dyumatsena. Sena means an army or armies, and Dyumat means full of light, shining light. So Aurobindo, from this name of the character, says that the symbolism of this character is he's the divine mind, which has so many shining armies and can achieve so much. But in the story, Dyumatsena has lost his sight. He's fallen blind. And because he's blind, he cannot rule the kingdom anymore. In those days, kings were not supposed to have any disability. Any king that had a disability had to stop being king and hand over to somebody else. So that's what's happened to Dyumatsena, who is the father of Satyavan. He represents the mind as it should be, the mind on its own high plane, but here in the material world, fallen blind, because it's lost its celestial kingdom of vision, its heavenly kingdom of vision, then it naturally has to lose its kingdom of glory. So King Dyumatsena has been exiled from his kingdom and is living in the forest with his wife and his son. So that is just a little key to the symbolism of the story. But then, Sarojini, would you read the next sentence, please?
Still, this is not a
Mere.
mere allegory. The characters are not
personified.
What it is, what
Incarnations.
Or emanations of living and conscious force, with whom we can enter into complete thoughts and they take human bodies in order to help man and show him away from his mortal state to a divine consciousness and immortal life.
Yes. So an allegory is a poem or a story in which qualities are turned into the characters. They are personified. Anger or love or beauty or generosity become characters in a story. It's very, very difficult to make such a story convincing. There are a few famous allegories, but They're not really very satisfactory as poems or as stories. But he says, Aurobindo says, that this story is not an allegory. It's not like that. These characters are incarnations, embodiments, or emanations, projections of living and conscious forces, forces that really exist. And so, we human beings can enter into concrete touch with these forces, with these beings. And they even sometimes take human bodies. They incarnate as human beings in order to help humanity and to show us the way from this state in which we are in the grip of ignorance and death, and lead us towards a divine consciousness and an immortal life. Would anybody like to ask anything about that before we go on? So this, yes, Mila.
It seems strange that Satyavan is the son of the mind, no?
Satyavan, in this case, the soul, is shown as the son of the divine mind. Is that what is puzzling you? Yes. I think we would have to look at the life divine again to understand why it's like that. Yes, Narendra.
This Vedic story, I don't understand. I mean, he was a god of law and death, and he got tricked by her. That's very puzzling.
Yes, I mean, that's just the legend. Yeah. So Aurobindo is not saying that the legend is telling how it was really. And in this poem, he shows how that god of death actually doesn't have any choice in the matter, since he's also the god of justice and correctness. He has to give to Savitri what is due to her. But she also, in order to overcome all the existing realities, the ground realities that human beings are living under, she has to overcome that god of law who keeps things the way they are, you know. So we will see that happening.
It's interesting that Savitri is more clever than the god of death. So she's human.
She's born as a human being, but she's an emanation of the Supreme Divine Mother. And finally he has to obey her, because she's the conscious force of the Supreme. But still, she's shown to us as a human being who has to discover her inner divinity, just like all of us do.
Yeah.
Yes, Narendra.
This about her thing about mind.
Yes.
See, this is Dyumatsena, because it has lost its vision, like we have lost our vision. Our mind has lost the vision, and so we lost the glory of the divine.
Yes.
So mind is the Dyumatsena.
He is the father of Satyavan. So Mila is finding it rather strange that the soul should be shown as the son of the mind, as the child of mind. So that's why I said we have to go back to the life divine and see what Aurobindo has to say about that. So this poem is called Savitri, a legend and a symbol. In my edition, it actually doesn't give the subtitle, but that's the title, A Legend and a Symbol. And Aurobindo's explained to us about the symbol part, and we shall trace the legend. He follows more or less the outline of the legend of the story. It's told in 12 books. This is a kind of literary convention that an epic, a long poem on a serious subject, may often be divided into 12 books. And then the books are subdivided into cantos, which actually means songs. It shows us that in the old days these poems were sung. But this epic has its own music, which comes out when we read it correctly. So it's also divided into 3 parts. Part 1 tells about the time before the birth of Savitri. It's the story of King Aswapati. So the book 1 is the Book of Beginnings, which is divided into 5 cantos. The first one, we'll have a look at the first part of the first canto today. It's called The Symbol Dawn. So this goes back to the Vedic symbolism also. The Vedic rishis worshipped the dawn as the new light, that every day brings a new light, a higher consciousness, a greater truth. But that light always alternates with night. In fact, there's an ancient riddle which asks about 2 sisters. Who are the 2 sisters, each of whom gives birth to the other? So it is day and night. There's always this alternation between night and the new day coming. So that is also a very important theme throughout this poem. So let us have a look at the first page, the symbol dawn. I have to warn you that this first half of the first canto, the first 6 pages, up to the first 185 lines, are perhaps the most difficult in the whole poem to understand. But we will do our best. Corinne, would you read?
It was the hour before the gods awake. Across the path of the divine even, the huge foreboding line of night, along your untemporal eternity, lay stretched immobile upon silence march.
Thank you. So there's something unusual about this first line. Anybody has anything to ask about this first line?
Yeah, obviously past tense and present tense mixed together.
Which mixes the, yes. So the question is, why does it say awake instead of awoke? My own beloved teacher, Amal Kiran, has written very beautifully on this first page of the poem. And he points out that the imagery which is here is about the way the gods wake up every morning in India. The hour before the gods awake is the hour between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, the priests open the temple doors, they make loud noises, and they start the puja. They wake the gods up. So when he says it like this, it was the hour before the gods awake, he's telling us that it's 3 o'clock in the morning on a particular day in time. And what follows is a temple imagery. The divine event is the dawn that's going to come, but there's something obstructing the arrival of that dawn. It's the night, the huge, foreboding mind of night, a night of darkness, foreboding of fear and dread. The night is dreading the coming of the dawn and wants to prevent it coming. Night is personified, a goddess, night. So there she is, lying across, as if across the threshold of the temple, alone in her unlit temple of eternity. It's a state of timelessness. Time hasn't started yet. The gods have not woken up yet. Everything, the whole universe is dark, this unlit temple. And there she's lying, stretched, immobile, unmoving, on the very edge of silence. On silence marge, there's a kind of threshold there. Will you read? Would you like to read?
Almost one third.
Opaque.
And Canto. In the symbol of the iris muse, the abstraction of the unbodied infinite.
Just read the next line.
A fathomless zero occupied the world.
Yes. So there she is. She's opaque. Something that's opaque, you can't see through it. And this darkness is impenetrable. You can't pass through it. This eyeless muse, this blind state of concentration or trance that she is in, is a somber symbol, a dark symbol. And Aurobindo says that in that darkness, one could almost feel the abysm, the huge, deep darkness of the unbodied infinite, the formless infinite, the infinite without any shape or form, unbodied. And because of that darkness, a fathomless zero occupied the world. The whole world, the whole human world, maybe the whole universe, is as if contained in or held in a zero, a nothingness. But that nothingness is so deep that it can't be measured. A fathom is the measurement that seamen use to measure how deep the sea is. So we use that word fathomless in a psychological sense to mean something that can't be measured or grasped or understood. The fathomless deeps of the abysm. The abyss is the deepest part of the sea. Nowadays, of course, they can measure it, but sailors in ships who measured their fathoms with a rope on which knots were tied at a certain distance, a fathom, and then they would tie a heavy something, a piece of lead or a stone on the bottom and drop it into the sea and find out how many fathoms it was to the bottom. So there's this emptiness and darkness, deep darkness is occupying the whole world. Mila, would you read?
A power of fallen boundless self, awake between the first and the last nothingness, recalling the tenebrous womb from which it came, turned from the insoluble mystery of birth and the tardy process of mortality, and longed to reach its end in vacant nought.
Yes. So this night is a power, a force, a power of self. It's a being. But this is self that seems to have fallen from its divine state. It's boundless. There's no limit to it. It is infinite. It is awake. It's awake before the first and the between the first and the last nothingness. So that nothingness is the asat that surrounds the universe. So this power of night is here in the universe, in our universe. It's between the first nothingness, when before the universe comes into existence, and the last nothingness, when the universe goes out of existence. That power is conscious, and it remembers this tenebrous womb, this womb of shadows and darkness that it has been born from. And it wants to go back there. It doesn't want to be born. It doesn't want to wake up. It's like us sometimes when we wake up in the morning and we think, oh, I would love to go back to sleep. I don't want to face the day ahead. No. That's what it's doing. It's turning away from this insoluble mystery of birth. Why does one have to be born? Why do we have to live? Why do we have to face the day, all the effort and the struggle? No? The tardy process of mortality, of going through a whole life and then dying finally. All that takes so long and seems to be leading nowhere. Why wake up at all? So that power longed to reach its end in vacant naught. It wants to sink back and become empty nothingness. Narendra.
As in a dark beginning of all things, a mute, featureless semblance of the unknown, repeating forever the unconscious act, longing forever the unseen will, cradle the cosmic that drowse of ignorant force, whose moved creative slumber kindles the suns and carries our lives in its somnambulist whirl.
That's it. There's the full stop. It's a difficult sentence. Let's look at it. It's as if this is a dark beginning of all things, the dark beginning of the universe, of the whole creation. No? It isn't, but it's like that. It's as like a dark beginning of all things. This night, this foreboding mind of night and this power of fallen, boundless self, they are like a dark beginning of all things. They are like a mute person cannot speak, cannot express themselves, a mute, featureless semblance. There are no features, there are no identifying qualities or appearances. This is a semblance. It's something that seems like the unknown with a capital U. The unknown reality. That semblance, it's silent, it's featureless, but it just goes on repeating forever the unconscious act, this action of returning and returning and returning. It goes on forever, prolonging this will which has set this whole cycle into movement, prolonging forever the unseeing will. That will seems to be blind, not to know what it wants. No? That mute, featureless semblance of the unknown is cradling, holding in its arms, as a mother holds her child, the drowse of the universe, the cosmic drowse of ignorant force. We are told that this universe that we live in is all energy, actually, force. And this is, or seems to be, unconscious force, ignorant force. So all this universe of ignorant force is being held in the arms of this darkness. But this ignorant force, which is drowsing, which is not in a conscious state, it's asleep, it's slumber, it's sleep, lights up the suns. It gives rise to all the stars in the universe. Somehow, although it is dark and although it's asleep, it gives rise to light. And it's because once there's light, then once there are stars, the rest of the universe comes into existence. So our lives too are carried in this whirl, this repetitive, circling movement of somebody who's asleep, really. A somnambulist is somebody who moves about and does things in their sleep. So the universe seems to be like that. It's a state of cosmic drowse, but it's kindling the suns and carrying the lives of all of us along with it. I think we will stop there for today. This is the darkness before the dawn. In English we have a proverb, no? That the darkest hour comes before the dawn. So Aurobindo is starting his poem in the darkness before the dawn, on a particular day, the day when Satyavan must die. And the whole story takes place on this one day. And then it ends at the night of the same day, when we find this foreboding mind of night completely transformed. I'm going to read it to you, the last sentence of the poem. Then, while they skirted yet the southward verge, lost in the halo of her musing brows, night, splendid with the moon dreaming in heaven, in silver peace possessed her luminous reign. She brooded through her stillness on a thought, deep guarded by her mystic folds of light, and in her bosom nursed a greater dawn. This transformation of night is the result of what Savitri does, what Savitri's victory in the course of this poem. So,
creating slumber.
A creative slumber. She's in her sleep, she's dreaming, and those dreams are everything we see around us. It's creative. The force is creative, even when she's asleep, even when she seems to be completely unconscious or just a somnambulist. She's constantly creating. We could read these lines together. I'd ask you to try and catch the rhythm, the beautiful rhythm that is here, the music of these lines. I used to have great difficulty with the first line, to get the rhythm of the first line, until I realized that one has to make a short break after the word hour. It was the hour before the gods awake. And in almost every line, there's one or two or occasionally three little breaks like that. They have a technical name in poetry. It's called a caesura. It's just a little pause, imperceptible. We have to keep the flow of the sense going, but this little pause, if we can find where that comes in each line, then we can get the rhythm right. And the rhythm is important because this is mantric poetry. And what is important about mantra is the correct pronunciation and the correct rhythm. That gives the understanding of the meaning, and eventually it brings you into a state where you receive the experience which lies at the origin of the mantra.
It was the hour before the gods awake. Across the path of the divine event, the huge foreboding mind of night alone in her unlit temple of eternity, lay stretched, immobile, upon silence marge. Almost one felt, opaque, impenetrable, in the sombre symbol of her eyeless muse, the abysm of the unbodied infinite. A fathomless zero occupied the world. A power of fallen, boundless self, awake between the first and the last nothingness, recalling the tenebrous womb from which it came, turned from the insoluble mystery of birth and the tardy process of mortality, and longed to reach its end in vacant naught. As in a dark beginning of all things, a mute, featureless semblance of the unknown, repeating forever the unconscious act, prolonging forever the unseeing will, cradled the cosmic drowse of ignorant force, whose moved creative slumber kindles the suns and carries our lives in its somnambulist whirl.